Chicago, Illinois, November 2019. The November wind swept across the cemetery with cruel indifference, rattling the bare branches of the oak trees and cutting through the black overcoats of the mourners gathered around the grave. Sarah Mitchell stood between her two brothers, her arm linked through Michael's, while Daniel stood on the other side, ramrod straight, refusing to cry. Their father, Thomas Mitchell, was being laid to rest. 67 years old. Heart attack. Sudden. Unexpected. The kind of death that leaves families reeling, grasping for conversations they never had, questions they never asked. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Sarah barely heard the pastor's words. She was watching the casket, that polished mahogany box containing the man who had taught her to ride a bike, who had walked her down the aisle, who had always been there. Quiet. Steady. Unassuming. After the service, they returned to their childhood home, the modest three-bedroom colonial in a working-class neighborhood on Chicago's South Side. The house smelled the same as it always had: coffee, old books, and the faint hint of the pipe their father had smoked in his study until their mother made him quit 10 years ago. Neighbors had filled the kitchen with casseroles and sympathy cards. Mrs. Peterson from next door had left a tuna noodle concoction that Sarah knew would go uneaten. Mr. Hendricks had brought over a bottle of whiskey that was already half empty. "I can't believe he's gone," Michael said, collapsing onto the couch. At 34, he was the youngest, still carrying the boyish looks that made people mistake him for a college student. "I talked to him last Tuesday. He said he was planning to redo the bathroom tiles this spring." Daniel, the eldest at 42, stood by the fireplace, staring at the framed photos on the mantel. "He never did get around to that bathroom. Talked about it for 5 years. That was Dad," Sarah said softly. "Always talking about things he'd do tomorrow." She walked through the living room, trailing her fingers over familiar surfaces. The worn armchair where Dad read the newspaper every morning. The coffee table with its permanent ring stains from decades of coffee mugs. The bookshelf filled with dog-eared paperbacks, westerns and spy novels, mostly. They would have to go through his things. Sort through a lifetime of accumulated possessions. Decide what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. "Not today," Sarah said, as if reading her brother's thoughts. "We can't do this today." Daniel nodded. "Next weekend. We'll come back next weekend." 1 week later. The house felt different with the heat turned down and the silence of emptiness filling every room. Sarah arrived first, letting herself in with her childhood key, a key she'd kept on her ring for 20 years, never imagining she'd use it for this. Michael showed up 20 minutes later with coffee and donuts. Daniel came last, apologizing. He'd had to rearrange his schedule at the law firm. They started in the attic, working methodically through boxes of Christmas decorations, old report cards, and clothes that had gone out of style decades ago. Then the basement, with its rusty tools and half-empty paint cans. Then the garage. The study was last. Their father's study was a small room at the back of the house, barely big enough for a desk, a bookshelf, and his favorite armchair. The walls were paneled in dark wood veneer, and the single window looked out onto the backyard where a swing set had once stood. "I'll take the books," Daniel said, already pulling volumes from the shelf. "I'll go through the desk," Sarah offered. Michael flopped into the armchair. "I'll supervise." Sarah sat in her father's desk chair, a worn leather office chair that creaked under her weight. The desk was organized with the fastidiousness of a man who had spent 40 years as an accountant. Pens in a mug. Paper clips in a small dish. A calendar from 2018 still hanging on the wall, flipped to December. She started with the top drawer. Office supplies. A calculator. A small notebook filled with grocery lists and reminders: call plumber, pick up prescription, Sarah's birthday, send card. The second drawer held old tax returns, neatly filed by year. The third was locked. "Does anyone have a key for this drawer?" Sarah asked. Daniel looked up from the bookshelf. "Try the mug on the windowsill. Dad always kept spare keys there." Sarah found the mug, a chipped ceramic thing that said "World's Best Dad," and indeed, there were 3 keys inside. The third one opened the locked drawer. Inside, she found a single manila folder, thick with papers. No label. No markings. "What's that?" Michael asked, leaning forward. "I don't know." Sarah opened the folder. The first thing she saw was a bank statement. But not from any local bank she recognized. The letterhead read, "Zurich International Bank, Grand Cayman Branch." What the hell? Daniel was suddenly beside her, looking over her shoulder. Sarah flipped through the papers. Bank statements. Account opening documents. Correspondence with something called Sterling Trust Corporation. And numbers. Lots of numbers. "Daniel," Sarah said slowly, "how much money do you think Dad had?" Daniel shrugged. "I don't know. He was an accountant. He did okay. Mom's life insurance money went to him after she passed. Maybe he had a couple $100,000 saved up." Sarah turned a statement around so he could see it. Daniel's face went pale. "That can't be right. The balance on the statement, $847,632.47. "Read it again," Michael whispered. Sarah read it aloud. $847,632.47. "Holy shit," Michael said. Daniel grabbed the folder, rifling through the documents. "There are statements here going back 20 years. Look, the account was opened in 1999. The initial deposit was $50,000. Sarah's mind was spinning. Their father, Thomas Mitchell, who drove a 10-year-old Ford Taurus, who clipped coupons from the Sunday paper, who complained about the price of everything from gasoline to groceries, had secretly amassed nearly $1 million. Why would he hide this? Michael asked. Why wouldn't he tell us? Daniel's jaw tightened. That's the question, isn't it? The next few weeks were a blur of phone calls, emails, and increasingly complicated conversations with offshore banks and trust companies. Daniel took the lead, using his legal training to navigate the bureaucracy. The account was real. The money was real. And as the executor of their father's estate, Daniel had the legal authority to access it. But there were conditions. According to the trust documents, Daniel explained one evening, the three of them gathered around Sarah's kitchen table, the money can only be distributed if we meet certain requirements. What kind of requirements? Sarah asked. Daniel slid a document across the table. We have to prove that we've learned the truth about our father. Those are the exact words. The truth about our father. And we have to provide written statements to the trust company explaining what we've discovered. Michael laughed incredulously. Is this some kind of joke? Dad's playing games with us from beyond the grave? He was an accountant, Daniel said. He liked things organized. He liked rules. This doesn't surprise me. Sarah picked up the document. The truth about our father? What does that even mean? He was a good man. He worked hard. He raised us. What truth is there to learn? Apparently, Daniel said, there's more to the story. They started digging. First, they went through every document in the study, searching for clues. Old letters. Photographs. Anything that might explain the secret account. In a shoebox at the back of a closet, Sarah found something, a stack of letters tied with string, postmarked from Vietnam, dated 1973. The return address was a military base. The handwriting was their father's. She sat on the floor and read them all. Dear Mom and Dad, the first one began. "I've been here 3 weeks now. It's hot and rainy and nothing like Chicago. I think about home every day. I think about the life I want to build when this is over. I want to go to college. I want to be an accountant, like Dad said. I want to have a family. I want to do something meaningful with my life." The letters continued for months. Descriptions of daily life. Requests for news from home. Worries about friends who had been wounded or killed. And always, always, talk of the future. "I've seen things I can't unsee," one letter read. "I've lost friends I'll never forget. But I've also learned something important. Life is short. Too short to waste. When I get home, I'm going to make every day count. I'm going to save money, invest wisely, and make sure my family never has to worry about anything. I'm going to be the kind of father my kids can be proud of." Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. He wrote these when he was 22 years old. Michael took the letters, reading silently. When he looked up, his eyes were wet too. "He kept his promise," Michael said quietly. "He made every day count. He was a good father." Daniel, standing in the doorway, cleared his throat. "There's more. I found something else." He held up a faded photograph. For young men in military uniforms, arms draped over each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera. In the background, a sign read, "Cam Ranh Bay, 1972. "That's Dad," Sarah said, pointing to the second soldier from the left. "He was so young." Daniel pointed to the soldier on the far right. His name was James Kowalski. He was Dad's best friend in Vietnam. They enlisted together, trained together, served together. "And?" Michael prompted. "And James Kowalski died. April 12, 1973. He stepped on a landmine 3 weeks before their unit was scheduled to come home. Dad was with him when it happened." The room fell silent. "Dad never talked about Vietnam," Sarah said. "Not once." "No," Daniel agreed. "He didn't. But apparently, he never forgot James Kowalski either." He handed them another document, a bank transfer record dated 1975. The transfer was for $5,000, sent to a woman named Helen Kowalski in Detroit, Michigan. James Kowalski's mother. "There are more," Daniel said. "Every year, for 44 years, Dad sent money to Helen Kowalski. Sometimes 5,000, sometimes 10. And after she passed away in 2010, he started sending it to her daughter, James's sister." Sarah did the math in her head. "How much total?" "I added it up. Just over $200,000 over the years." Michael sat down heavily. He was supporting his friend's family. All this time, and he never said a word. They drove to Detroit the following weekend. Helen Kowalski's daughter, Margaret, lived in a small house in a quiet neighborhood, not unlike the one their father had lived in. She was 68 years old, with gray hair and kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "You must be Thomas's children," she said, opening the door. "I recognize the eyes. Come in, come in." Her home was cozy, filled with photographs and knitting projects and the smell of fresh-baked cookies. She led them to the living room and insisted they sit, have tea, try her oatmeal raisin cookies. "Your father was a good man," Margaret said, settling into an armchair. "The best man I ever knew, besides my own father." Sarah leaned forward. "Can you tell us about him? About what he did?" Margaret smiled. "He never wanted anyone to know. He made me promise, when he first started sending money, that I would never tell a soul. But I suppose that promise died with him." She told them the story. James Kowalski had been Thomas Mitchell's best friend. They'd grown up 3 blocks apart in Chicago, enlisted together, shipped out to Vietnam together. They'd promised each other that if anything happened, the survivor would look after the other's family. When James died, Margaret said, "Your father wrote to my mother. He told her about the promise they'd made. He said he intended to keep it." At first, Helen Kowalski refused the money. She was proud, independent, determined to make her own way. But Thomas was persistent. He sent small amounts at first, $100 here, $50 there, always with a note explaining that it was what James would have wanted. Eventually, Margaret continued, "My mother relented. Not for herself, for us kids. For me and my brothers. She used the money to buy clothes, school supplies, Christmas presents. Things we couldn't have afforded otherwise." The payments continued for decades. Through Helen's illness, through Margaret's own struggles as a single mother, through college tuitions and wedding expenses and the birth of grandchildren. He never missed a year, Margaret said. Not once. Even when the economy was bad, even when he must have had his own struggles, the money always arrived. Always with a note. Always signed, "With gratitude, Tom." She rose from her chair and crossed to a small desk in the corner. From a drawer, she pulled out a stack of letters, dozens of them, tied with ribbon, yellowed with age. "These are the notes he sent," she said. "Every one of them. My mother kept them all." Sarah took the stack carefully, reverently. She opened the top letter, dated December 1975, and read her father's familiar handwriting. "Dear Helen," it began. "I hope this letter finds you and the children well. Enclosed is a small check to help with the holidays. James was my brother in every way that mattered, and I know he would want you to have this. Please don't refuse it. It's the least I can do. With warmest regards, Tom Mitchell." Letter after letter, year after year. The handwriting changed over time, from the crisp script of a young man to the slightly shaky hand of someone aging, but the message remained the same. Gratitude. Respect. Love. "This is who our father was," Michael said softly. "Not the man with the secret bank account. This." Daniel nodded slowly. The bank account wasn't for himself. It was for this. For keeping a promise he made 50 years ago. Sarah thought about all the years she'd known her father. The quiet evenings. The patient advice. The way he always seemed to understand, always seemed to know what to say, even when she couldn't find the words herself. He was teaching us, she realized. All along, he was teaching us. Not with lectures or lessons. Just by being who he was. Margaret smiled. That's what James used to say about him. "Tom doesn't talk about doing the right thing," he'd say. "He just does it." They returned to Chicago with a new understanding of their father and a new appreciation for the secret he'd kept for so long. The trust company required one more thing, a written statement from each of them, explaining what they'd learned about their father and what the inheritance meant to them. Sarah wrote for 3 days, filling page after page with memories and reflections. "My father taught me that integrity isn't about what you say," she wrote. "It's about what you do when no one is watching." For 44 years, he kept a promise to a friend who couldn't keep it himself. He never told anyone. He never sought recognition. He just did what was right, quietly and consistently, year after year. That's the truth I learned about my father. He was a man of quiet honor. A man who understood that the measure of a life isn't in what you accumulate, but in what you give away. The money in that account isn't wealth, it's a legacy. Not of dollars and cents, but of love and loyalty and the kind of character that most people can only aspire to. I'm proud to be his daughter. And I'm grateful for the lesson he taught me, even from beyond the grave. The best things in life aren't things at all. They're the promises we keep, the people we help, and the love we leave behind. Michael's statement was shorter, more direct, but no less heartfelt. I always thought my father was just a regular guy. An accountant who went to work, came home, and watched TV. But now I know different. He was a hero. Not the kind who wears a cape or makes the news. The kind who does the hard thing, the right thing, every single day, without expecting anything in return. I want to be that kind of man. I want to keep my promises the way he kept his. I want to be someone my kids can look up to, the way I look up to him. Thanks, Dad. For everything. Daniel's statement was the longest, perhaps because he was the eldest, perhaps because he'd always felt the weight of responsibility most heavily. For weeks after my father's death, I was angry. Angry that he'd kept secrets. Angry that he'd hidden money we never knew about. Angry that he'd left us with questions instead of answers. But now I understand. He wasn't hiding the money, he was protecting it. Protecting the promise he'd made. Protecting the privacy of the family he'd helped for so long. Protecting us from the burden of a secret that wasn't ours to carry. My father was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He taught me that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, it's measured in the lives you touch, the burdens you ease, the love you give without expectation of return. I hope I can live up to his example. I hope I can be half the man he was. Rest easy, Dad. Your promise is kept. Your secret is safe. And your children, we understand now. We understand everything. 1 year later. Sarah stood at the front of the room, looking out at the faces gathered there. Family. Friends. Colleagues. And in the front row, her 2 brothers, watching with pride. The Thomas Mitchell Memorial Scholarship had just awarded its first grants, 3 full-ride scholarships to children of veterans, chosen for their academic achievement and their commitment to community service. It's fitting, Sarah had told the selection committee, that we honor my father's memory by helping others. That's what he would have wanted. The scholarship fund had been established with half the money from the secret bank account. The other half had been split 3 ways, to Sarah, Michael, and Daniel, with a note from the trust company that read simply. Use it well. Love, Dad. Sarah had used her share to pay off her mortgage and start a college fund for her own children. Michael had started a small business, a dream he'd never thought possible. Daniel had donated his portion to a veterans organization, continuing their father's legacy of quiet generosity. After the ceremony, the 3 siblings gathered at their father's grave. The headstone was simple, just his name, dates, and a single line. He kept his promises. I still miss him, Sarah said. Every day. Daniel put his arm around her. Me too. But I feel like I know him better now than I ever did when he was alive. Michael knelt and placed a small stone on the headstone, a Jewish tradition their father had observed, though none of them could remember why. He was a good man. The best. Sarah thought about the secret bank account and everything it had revealed. Not greed or dishonesty, but love. Not deception, but devotion. Not selfishness, but sacrifice. The money was never the point, she said softly. It was always about something bigger. Daniel nodded. He knew we'd have to dig to find it. He knew we'd have to ask questions, follow leads, uncover the truth. He wasn't hiding the money, he was hiding the lesson. Making us work for it. Making us earn it. And we did, Michael said. We earned it. They stood together in the winter sunshine, 3 siblings bound by grief and love and a newfound understanding of the man who had raised them. The wind rattled the bare branches of the oak trees. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Life went on, as it always does. But something had changed. Something had shifted. The secret was out now, and with it, a legacy of love that would ripple outward for generations to come. Sarah took one last look at her father's grave, then turned to walk away. Goodbye, Dad, she whispered. And thank you. For everything. 5 years later. The letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, addressed to Sarah in handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside, she found a photograph and a note. The photograph showed a young woman in a cap and gown, beaming at the camera. On the back, someone had written, "Graduation Day, Class of 2025. The note was brief. "Dear Sarah. You don't know me, but I know your father. Or rather, I know of him. My grandmother was Helen Kowalski. The money your father sent to our family every year made it possible for my mother to go to college, for my aunt to start her business, for me to become the first person in our family to earn a degree. I'm writing to say thank you. Not just for the money, but for the example. Your father taught me that one person can make a difference. That a promise kept is a life well lived. That love, real, quiet, stubborn love, can change the world. I never met him. But I'll spend my whole life trying to be like him. With gratitude. Emily Kowalski, Washington. Class of 2025, University of Michigan." Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she picked up the phone and called her brothers. "She gets it," Sarah said when Daniel answered. "She understands." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's the thing about Dad's legacy. It just keeps going. One life touches another, touches another, touches another. Like ripples in a pond." Michael, on the other line, laughed softly. "All from a secret bank account. Who would have thought?" Sarah looked at the photograph of the young graduate, so full of hope and possibility. "Dad would have thought," she said. "He planned it all along." Outside her window, the sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere, she knew, her father was watching. And smiling. Because the secret was out now. The truth was known. And the legacy, the real legacy, the one that mattered, would live on forever. This story was inspired by the universal truth that our parents are often more complex, more generous, and more remarkable than we ever know during their lifetimes. The secret bank account is a metaphor for all the hidden goodness that exists in every family, the sacrifices made, the promises kept, the love given without expectation of return. Take a moment to appreciate the people in your life. Ask them questions. Listen to their stories. You might be surprised by what you discover. And if you enjoyed this story, please share it with someone you love. That's what Thomas Mitchell would have wanted.